We're now going to look at the Wall tool. The Wall tool is located in the Architecture tab within the Build panel. First one is our Wall tool. So the Wall tool will create a non-structural element in our model. We'll click once to open up the tool, and here you'll see our green contextual tab appears with our Draw panel, our options for that Wall tool, as well the modification section is open. The first thing we're going to look at is the Draw panel. The Draw panel will display our options on how in which we can draw our wall itself. We have the option of drawing by a line, a rectangle. We have our inscribed polygon, our circumscribed polygon, our circle, start end radius arc, center end arc, tangent end arc, fillet arc, pick lines, and pick faces. So depending on how you want to draw your wall, this is where you would then choose that option. To draw by line, I know it's selected as it's highlighted in blue. When I come into the drawing area to get my wall started, if we refer down to the status bar, it's telling me to click to enter wall start point. To get started, I'll simply left click once with the mouse. That will enter my start point for my wall. I'll then move my cursor in the direction which I want to draw my wall. I can also add an angle by moving my cursor still. To specify the finish point, again, I'll just left click with the mouse. So to specify a length when I'm creating a wall, when I start my wall and move the cursor in the direction in which I want my wall to be created, you'll notice that there is a blue dimension. This is known as a temporary dimension. So as I increase the length of the wall, you'll see that the dimension as well increases. So right now it is increasing in increments of 100. If I zoom in, those increments decrease down to 20. Again, if I zoom in more, those increments are now going up in 5s. So that is one method of specifying a distance. We can also move the wall in the direction which we want to create it, and then manually type in my distance on the keyboard of 3000 and pressing enter. So there we have the length of that wall is 3000. So that is a second option of how we can specify the length of a wall. The third option, which is what Revit is based around, the first thing we'll do is just place the wall, and then afterwards we'll come back and revise it. So we will place the wall, then we'll come back, select it, then using the temporary dimensions, that's where we will then revise that distance and change its length. As well, if we wanted to add in an angle, we'll just specify our start point, add an angle, again roughly with the dimensions which we want. And then once it's placed, we'll come back, select the wall. Here we can change the distance, and there we can change our angle. So this is the basics of how we're going to model our project. The next method of which we can draw a wall is by rectangle. To start our rectangle, we'll click once on the screen, moving the cursor away in the opposite direction and clicking again and double escape. So as we've done before, the best method is to place the wall first, and then we'll come back and revise those dimensions. So we'll select one side, our temporary dimension appears, and we can adjust the length. Again, selecting the top, we can then adjust the width. This is the best method for modeling with Revit. The next drawing method is the Inscribed Polygon. So first we will specify our start point, which essentially is the center of our polygon, moving the cursor in the direction we want to go, then specifying our radius. So I've just moved my cursor in the correct direction, as well moving up in the increments to arrive at 3000. And then I'll click to place, and that is now an inscribed polygon. Same method for the circumscribed. The difference between the two, if you'll see in the center of the circumscribed, there's an outline of a circle. So the circumscribed means that the polygon sits on the outer face of that circle, while the inscribed sits on the inner face of that circle. And the next drawing method is by circle. So we will click to specify the center point, click again to specify our radius, and then afterwards we can come back to adjust the radius itself. You'll also notice that it's not a complete circle, there's actually two curves joined together. So we can delete one out and have a remaining curve. Next method is the start end radius. This will be creating an arc. So we'll specify our start and end point by clicking the mouse. So we'll click once for our start point, clicking again for our end point, and then lastly we'll specify our arc or radius. The next method is the center end arc. So we'll specify the center point, then the end point, and then lastly the actual arc itself. The next method is the tangent end arc. So this creates an arc at the end of a line. Next is the fillet arc. This creates a round corner between two intersecting lines. Next method is pick lines. This is a very useful tool. So as an example, I'm going to draw some model lines. So in the architecture tab, there's my model line. I'm just going to draw a few lines. And then with the pick lines tool, I then simply have to select the line for the wall to then be attached to it. This is very useful when we import CAD files. We'll simply use the pick line tool to attach it to the lines, and we'll quite quickly build up our model. Lastly is pick faces. The pick faces method applies when we create a conceptual mass. We can then apply a wall to that face. When we're modeling a project, we are presented with multiple modeling aids. These aids will appear on almost all of the components which we will use. So if I draw my first wall and draw another wall above it, first thing we'll get is our temporary vertical dimension. So you'll see that there's a dashed blue line. That is telling me that that wall, when I start it, will be snapped directly above it. I can also use the temporary dimension to specify the distance before I've even started. So click once to start, move my cursor in the direction, and again I'm presented with that vertical dimension, and click. So now I know that both of those walls are started at the same point, as well have the same length. Once it's placed, if I then select one of the walls, not only am I presented with the temporary dimension to change the length, I can also change its position relative to the closest component, which is the wall below. So it's currently 2500 between each of those location lines. So I can increase that or decrease it. As well, we have the grips, which I can click and drag to extend out the length. I can also add an angle with those grips, as well as the temporary dimension. Below there's another dimension symbol. If selected, we'll make that temporary dimension into a permanent dimension. To then remove it, we'll select it and delete it. I deleted it using the delete key on the keyboard. So another feature is this flipping arrow. So our location line is currently set to the interior face. So I can flip it using these arrows across that location line. With the temporary dimension on the right hand side, it has two grips as well. So this temporary dimension is currently set to the internal face. If I wanted to change the position of that temporary dimension, I will click and drag it. Once the face becomes highlighted in blue, I can then let go of the mouse for the temporary dimension to change. Again, click and drag the grip until I see the highlighted blue line, and then let go.